Good afternoon, and big thank you to Artists at Risk Connection, Art at a Time Like This, and Brick Theater. Global censorship, what it looks like, who does it, and how to combat it. I understand we have a little time squish, so I'm going to get right into it. Introducing our panelists. There are longer, more in-depth bios of the panelists in your booklet. This is just a little tiny slice. And so, to get started, first to my right, Coco Fusco. Coco Fusco is an interdisciplinary artist and writer based in New York. She is a recipient of the 2003 Free Speech Defender Award from the National Coalition Against Censorship and author of Dangerous Moves, Performance and Politics in Cuba, published in 2015. Fusco is a professor at Cooper Union School of Art. To her right is Khaled Jarrar, a Palestinian multidisciplinary artist exploring modern power struggles and their social, cultural impact on ordinary citizens. His second feature film, Notes on Displacement, premiered at the IDFA in Vision and will be screened in Brooklyn Academy of Music this upcoming Wednesday, June 12th. So please don't miss it. And to his right is Omaid Sharifi, who is a recognized artivist and esteemed co-founder of ArtLords. He did a fellowship at Harvard University and sits on many boards, including Civicus, the Atlantic Council's Millennium Leadership Fellow alumni, and Sharifi is an expertise conceptualizing, designing, and executing projects in Afghanistan and South Asia. And to our far right is Octopizzo. Octopizzo is a celebrated award-winning hip-hop artist from Kenya, a humanitarian and entrepreneur. He founded his nonprofit Octopizzo Foundation in 2015, which unites the ingredients of creativity, art, music, culture, and sports to support vulnerable youths. And we'll hear about that in detail soon. So, my first question is for you, Coco. Can you tell us about the conditions around censoring and some censorship of colleagues of yours in Cuba?
Because I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm not the censored one. I'm going to talk about Cuban artists and that situation. And I'm excerpting here from a longer paper that I just wrote that I'm going to present next week in Colombia about the situation of two Cuban artists who were censored and also put in prison, okay? Since the 1990s, many Cuban artists have sought the means to circumvent state bureaucracy in order to avoid censorship and communicate directly with fellow citizens and foreigners. Over the past 3 decades, artists have blurred the lines between public and private space through the use of the internet and the conversion of their homes into galleries, theaters, music and film studios. They've also carried out performative incursions in public space and social media. The proliferation of these temporary autonomous zones has diminished the power of the state institutions in Cuba to define Cuban culture. All right, Ministry of Culture officials have taken to railing against what they perceive as the so-called vulgarity of reggaeton, but its popularity among young Cubans is the real political threat for a state that seeks to minimize dissent and maintain monopolistic control of the country's self-image. The adoption of the song Patria y Vida as the battle cry of the July 2021 protests is precisely what Cuban authorities have sought to avoid. Prior to 2018, the Cuban state tended to interfere with these independent endeavors on an ad hoc basis, detaining individual artists deemed socially dangerous, such as outspoken rappers, or curtailing activities that impinged upon the profit potential of the state music industry. These were the most extreme forms of discipline and punishment for the majority of creators whose conduct would otherwise be shaped by educational directives, demands for volunteerism and political engagement, and promises of rewards for informing on others. 2018 was the year that internet service was extended to Cuban cell phones, adding millions of dollars of income to the Cuban telecommunications service coffers. This economic benefit came with a downside in that giving Cubans internet access on their phones turned the majority population into an instant audience for dissident voices. That same year, Cuban authorities began to usher in laws to systematize restrictions on cultural production and the use of national symbols. Law 349 extended the Cuban state's reach into the private lives of its artists by turning any cultural expression made public without state authorization into a potential criminal offense. Law 373 reinforced the powers of the Cuban Film Institute to control production and circulation of films and thereby restrict the creation and distribution of independent cinema. Article 33 of Law 128 restricted the use of the Cuban flag by citizens, even though state tourism peddles dozens of cheap artifacts emblazoned with national symbols, including the Cuban flag. Law 370 imposed sanctions for using the internet to circulate information deemed to be against the so-called social interests, and that has been applied to artists, activists, as well as members of the general population. The fact that these laws are applicable to entire cultural sectors has politicized young artists who began to see themselves as potential targets. This altered self-perception from a privileged elite in Cuba to social outcast galvanized collective acts of defiance leading up to the largest protests to have taken place in the cultural sector in 60 years. These broader struggles over freedom of expression form the backdrop to the cases of two artists whose works I will concentrate on today, Hamlet Labastida and Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara. Labastida is a university-trained visual artist who identifies as white, while Otero Alcántara is self-taught and black. Both of these artists have challenged the Cuban state's control over public discourse in their artworks, and both have experienced censorship, harassment, defamation in state media, and imprisonment. After being accused of inciting others to commit a crime and being detained at Villa Marista, which is state security headquarters, for 3 months, Labastida was forced into exile in September 2021. Otero Alcántara was arrested on his way to the July 11, 2021 protests and was sentenced to 5 years for allegedly insulting the Cuban flag in a performance in 2019 and also for public disorder and disrespect for authority. He is serving time in a maximum security prison in Guanajuato, surrounded by convicted murderers. Labastida is a visual artist who deconstructs the revolutionary iconography and rhetoric of the early years of the Cuban Revolution. His signature style features elaborate stencils that cite famous speeches rationalizing state repression. He also reconfigures heroic imagery associated with government agencies involved in policing. Otero Alcántara is an interdisciplinary artist and activist who in 2016 created an online museum of dissidents that documents the history of opposition to established power structures in Cuba from the colonial period to the present. He co-founded the San Isidro movement of independent artists and activists in 2019. He has staged numerous performative interventions that critique state control of national symbols, institutional racism, and the Cuban government's prioritization of tourism over public works. These artists' respective conflicts with Cuban authorities speak to the ways in which the state's perception of the dangers posed by nonconformity intersects with questions of race and class. White intellectuals are banished, thus undermining their status as spokespeople of the culture. Working class people of color are condemned to incarceration and social death. Labastida's relationship with Cuban state institutions has been fraught since he began to present his artworks in the street of Havana in 2003. Soon thereafter, he received visits from state security agents who questioned his motives. In 2008, when he attended the University of the Arts, he created a performance entitled Lamento Cubano that incurred the ire of his professors because it referred to the Varela Project, Osvaldo Paya's attempt in 1998 to bring about constitutional reforms via popular petition. After he journeyed to Poland for an artist residency in 2011, he was denied re-entry to his homeland until 2016. In 2017, when art collector Ela Fontanel Cisneros purchased selections from his Cultura Profiláctica series and tried to take them out of Cuba, state security impounded the artworks and gave her a document stated that they contained counter-revolutionary content. La Bastida returned to Europe in 2020 for an artist residency in Berlin, but continued to participate in online discussions with members of the 27N movement that emerged after the mass sit-in in the Ministry of Culture in November 2020. Okay, that was the protest, the mass sit-in.
Octopizzo, can you tell us about the conditions in Kenya and an example of when you or your work was censored?
Yeah, sure. So in Kenya, it's a bit different, especially for artists. And I mean like performing artists, both like live performance and also like painters and like visual artists. Reason being, like if you made any song or any kind of art that was political, it will not get airplay. Because 90% of media houses are owned by politicians. So, and the 90% that are owned by politicians are the most popular ones. So that's the place where every artist also is expecting their music to be played. So you either have to dumb down your music, sing about a lot of partying, or use a lot of metaphors that they might not be able to crack. So we, in Nairobi, we have our own slang that young people use. It's called sheng. Sheng is a mix of English, Swahili, and mother tongue. And 90% of it, if you're 35 years and above, you won't understand. So it's beautiful. It's the best thing that has happened to Nairobi. So this is the language we use to rap with, because then our target audience understand what we are saying, understand the code language. The language changes every single day. So the word might mean water today, tomorrow it's a different word. And this is the way we are trying to keep the messaging going. But if you just was to talk about something straightforward without like using the metaphorical words, it will be silenced. Reason being, you don't run the radio. We have an advantage of using social media, but also that is still controlled. Can be flagged. You get calls. Kenya can be, it can be scary sometimes. You can get random calls like, hey, we see what you're doing, you need to relax. So if you're scared...
You get calls?
Yeah, you get calls.
Okay.
You get calls as artists, just random calls like, hey, we see what you're really pressing on this, you need to relax. So if you're not built for it, you will relax. If you're built for it, that's the best that's the best response you need, because that means then whatever you say is the real deal. So you need to keep going.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the feeling of being watched also has its own power in itself.
Yeah, it's scary and not. It's scary to some level, because then you don't have power to not know what's going to happen to you. But there's also like freedom to it, that you've spoken your realness. You're just not in this world to be a follower. You can speak your mind. And if your mind is the reason you have to be judged, sometimes it's okay.
And can you expand a little bit on the conditions that moved you to start Octopizzo Foundation? Can you go back to years before 2015?
So I grew up in a slum called Kibera. It's probably one of the largest now in Africa. And the reason I started the foundation is after high school, most of us don't go beyond high school. So we always just hanging around. Maybe you get into sports, hang up in a barbershop. And I felt there were so many of us that were just chilling, and we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know where we were heading. So we started like a youth group. It started just as a youth group where instead of hanging around, and because now if any crime was to happen in the community, we were the first suspects. So our aim was to just get like a center or a hall, because there was none in the area. So we just like kind of rented a 2-bedroom house. We used this house to just come and hang out. We didn't know what we want to do there, but we just didn't want to be on the streets. So we felt like having this house, we could come there. If you're a dancer, you come with your CD, you just put on the player and you do a routine. We started rapping, so we used this room to do battle raps and freestyles. And this is how the Octopizzo Foundation was birthed. After some times, we now had a proper structure, like what can we do as people from this community? Because I feel like most of the time, people expect change to come from so far, you know, and our solutions in the community might not come from Harvard. And there's always this misconception that the most learned people have solutions for everything, which is not true. Because if you've never lived in a slum, it's really hard for you to grasp what is going on there, irrespective of how intelligent you are. And so we felt like, what do we have that we know about this community that we can give back? Because I'm not a big fan of charity, because it's really one way. I'm a believer of giving back, because giving back and charity are two different things. Giving back is because I understand, I've experienced this life, I've slept hungry, but charity is that I have and you don't have. So whatever I give you, you have to take, and you don't question.
When there is any speaking out that the judge, the crime is punished very severely. Is that an embellishment, or am I accurate? Because I feel like there's different levels of
yeah, like if you
situations.
were to go, for example, for demonstrations, which is legally, you have to get like something from the city council, then you can go for demonstrations. But again, if you're arrested at demonstrations, they always put other stuff on you, you know, as long as you fit the profile. So if you come from the hood, there's a lot of things you fit. You fit to be a thug, you fit to be like you are working with some drugs. So it will change from what you are demonstrating about, if it's police brutality, which happens in Kenya a lot. And then they just put other things on you, and it will be so hard for you to even get out. So that happens. But in the last like 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot of human rights activists with pro bono lawyers that are following cases like this. So people that have been was arrested like 5 years ago for demonstrating, they've just been in remand, not even jailed, but they didn't know what to do, because most of them are young people. The young people are the first people who always go out on the street and say, we don't want this anymore. We want to see a different thing. But young people are very systematically now like put down.
And once you're arrested, then it's very hard to push back against that. Like,
yeah, exactly.
And then what about the LGBT rights? Like, how is it when people are publicly gay or queer, all that?
In Kenya, it's better than it used to be. It's changed for the past, like I'd say, 3 years. You can feel free to be whoever you want. But in some areas in the country that are not like, let's say, the capital city, where there's more metropolitan, where people are still very culturally rooted in a certain way of living, it is not something that you can still talk about openly. But in the public cities and in the capital, it's okay.
Thank you, Sweden.
Yeah.
Omaid? Are you on?
Yeah, should be.
Okay. The conditions, and then also an experience about being censored.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And thank you for all of you for being here. There's a beautiful day outside, sunny. You could be in a park near the water, but you decided to be in this dark room looking at us in this bright light, a few guys from far afar. So thank you. Appreciate that. For me to speak about how we were censored as an organization, as an art organization in Afghanistan, I'll just give you a crash course in the history of Afghanistan, which will be 30 seconds, so not very long, to just set the context and then what we did and why that was censored. So the crash course is last 50 years of our life, and especially my life, has been war and violence. And this starts, or even before the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the Cold War, and then the Civil War, and then the Taliban invasion, which is the fundamentalist Islamic movements, and then you have the American invasion and NATO invasion of Afghanistan. So last 50 years has been war, violence, and a lot of people died. And during the wars, what happens is the first thing that goes away, or the people who are most affected, are the artists and the art. So Kabul Museum was looted. And most probably some of those artworks ended up in British Museum, or probably in museums here in DC or New York. And growing up, I never had a chance to go to a gallery or a museum because there was none. And a generation or two of people like myself, we never had the chance to go to a gallery. So art was not available in any shape or form. This is the context. Why we did what we did through ArtLords was first to give people some hope and healing. In a context like that, it was very important. The second thing was because war affected our education system, we were never taught critical thinking. Not in the mosque, not in the school, not in universities. So we thought our art could promote critical thinking, which it did. And the third thing was about promoting resistance and protest through our art.
Shall we see some images?
Oh yeah, of course, they can go on.
Thank you.
So now if you remember these two things, the context and what we did and why we did this, so we started ArtLords. And the first mural we did, we didn't know that it will be as big as it became. So the first mural, I went to the Ministry of Education because at that time, this government, which was the Republic, 20 years, they were most corrupt and most incompetent. We went to them, and they had this, they called ghost schools. So in the south of the country, which there's the stronghold of the Taliban and fundamentalists, there was no schools, but the Ministry of Education was getting a lot of money because of ghost schools. So I went to them and I told them, you have very ugly walls in the ministry, and Ministry of Education is in the heart of Kabul city. And I told them, I want to paint your walls. And they said, okay, why not? They gave me the wall, and we started painting the walls. And imagine this road in the heart of Kabul city was blocked because a group of us, young people, men and women with long hairs, painting a mural, and it says, I see you. I know you're corrupt. I know you're stealing my money. I know you have ghost schools. Either God will judge you or we will take you to justice. So this is the first mural we did, I see you. And the Ministry of Education is like surprised because it's in their wall and it says something, the corruption is happening within their ministry. So, and what happened is that I invited everybody to paint with us. So anybody crossing by, doesn't matter who you are, get a brush, start painting about the corruption which is happening upstairs at the Ministry of Education. So that's how the ArtLords began 12, 13 years ago. And we decided that we have a very powerful tool, which is the brush and all these walls in the city. And we could use these walls as our canvases to bring hope to the people, bring people together, give them that engagement and ownership. Because a lot of people of Afghanistan, they did not think they have a say in the future of their country. Because either it's the international community who is bringing the money, making decisions, or it's the incompetent and corrupt government that we had in Afghanistan. So the ordinary people had a way to really speak, have a voice, or their voices being amplified through these murals all over Afghanistan. We ended up painting over 2,200 murals across Afghanistan and then in South Asia and Central Asia as well. And at that time, the Republic, which was very corrupt, they decided to censor us because these murals were encouraging people to ask questions. These murals were asking people to be accountable and transparent. And these murals were countering the violent extremism propaganda that the Taliban had. They were brainwashing young kids to be suicide attackers, and we were sending songs and music and plays that were encouraging people to be kind with empathy and all of that. So that is how we were struggling with them. But luckily, we had a good constitution, the republic, and all the freedoms that we could fight them and continue doing this work. What happened 2021, the Taliban comes in, and the first thing that they do is remove all the murals. Like before even announcing their government, they started destroying all the murals. So 2,200 murals gone. And instead of it, there might be, like, this is the mural from the Taliban, instead of the mural that I have, which was encouraging women's engagement. It was about joy, about how powerful women are in Afghanistan. And then it says that the woman should be like this. And then instead of murals that I had, there's a mural, famous mural, that the US government representative signs the deal with the Taliban in Doha, which eventually brings down the republic in Afghanistan. The first mural that they removed was that mural. And instead, they have written a message that the message was from infidels, and it's an infidel propaganda, and now they have their own black and white mural. So for me, art has always been about hope and healing, about resistance and protest, and that's why these dark forces, black and white forces, they censor it.
Thank you. Khaled, you're the person who's moved to New York most recently, I think, in this group. Can you tell us about your situation, specifically a time of being censored specifically, and what the conditions are? Because we hear so much from far away.
So I'm just taking a few seconds to express a kind of gratitude to be here in this time of moments where people are discussing if genocide is happening or it's not happening. And this is not the issue, is to find a language for what is happening, is genocide or not, but it is terrifying. And it is incredibly, like, sad and make me so angry and mad. But at the same time, you see, like, a lot of signs that show some hopes that people are, like, feeling the injustice that's happening to us as Palestinians over decades as a result of, like, imperial, colonial, neoliberal projects from British, like, and French Sykes-Picot to divide the Levantine, like, into pieces and to give it to certain amount. So it's a long history, but it's very important also for me to put those words, like, because I grew up in this place where, open my eyes, I see always flag of Israel. I never, ever, like, before the first Intifada started, I saw any flag of Palestine because it was forbidden. Forbidden even to write the word Palestine. And when the first Intifada started, like, my first memory, I was 11, we were taken to caves with like adults and activists, and my mission, they gave me, like, fabric, and they asked me to cut this fabric into pieces and to take it home and sew it to make flags of Palestine. And I said, what the hell is that? I never saw this before. So because in school we were censored, all our curriculum in school was designed by the Zionist state. So if anybody, like, write the word, like, when we go to do graffiti, my first graffiti was Palestine Hurra, Palestine free, like, or Palestine free. And then for that, your life will be censored, because if the Israeli snipers will see you, will shoot you. Long story short, like, my first experience with censorship that I faced as an artist was in the 13th of July, 2014, when I was invited to come to show my film Infiltrators at the New Museum in New York. And I was excited. I got the visa. I managed to smuggle myself to Jerusalem to get to the interview with the American embassy to get the visa. I got the visa. I wanted to cross the border to go to Jordan to take my flight, and then the Israeli, they said, oh, you're a security threat. You're not allowed to leave the country. So they hauled me, and one of them even called me like, you're a garbage. And yeah, and then I went back home, and then I start understanding, like, as an artist, what is it to be censored by, like, State of Israel, and how our, so when I moved to New York last year, I moved 23 in April 23, and I received my temporary green card from the American system, and I open it, and then it's like, it says place of birth unknown. So this is another kind of not censoring, it's deleting. Like, I thought, like, when I was moving to New York, I was thinking always I'm aliens in New York for David Bowie, but then I'm not even an alien. So it put me in a place where I feel that I need to, like, find my English intellect, and I need to force my English on my own self to be able to speak the language, to be able to speak and to tell my narrative with my own, like, voice and visual. And for me, art is I don't know what is it. It is just a place where it keeps me alive. It gives me little space of hope to escape from all this horror that we see in our life. And it managed to communicate with a lot of people, and it makes me happy. And I would love to see you at my New York premiere for my film Notes on Displacement at BAM Cinema, who are hosting it as private screening. So for me, this amount of like welcoming also in this city, it is encouraging to keep going, and thank you for the invite.
Yeah, that is, yeah. But even that, putting the unknown is another erasure in action by the government.
I don't know exactly. I'm trying to understand why the word Palestine is so scary.
It's just not recognized. It's not officially recognized by the U.S. government.
Because they
That's why
don't want to recognize it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and this is exactly like the British and the Zionists who deleted the word from, or tried to delete the word from the whole dictionary. Like the bird that I use in one of my work, State of Palestine, and I used the bird Palestine sunbird. And the Israelis, like, they used that bird in one of their stamps, and they couldn't change the name. So they tried to change the name in English, but they couldn't because it's in Latin. Like the first Latin Orientalist who came to Palestine, discovered Palestine, they called this bird like the Palestine sunbird. So they couldn't change it in English. So they are trying to delete it.
Second round of questions is about how we're combating it.
Right.
And so, go.
Okay. During the 8 months between that mass sit-in in the Cuban Ministry of Culture in November 2020 and the July 2021 protests, online private chats proliferated in which Cuban artists planned responses to the arrests of peers, countered the defamation campaigns against them in state media, and formulated demands for civil and creative rights to present to the Ministry of Culture. In a private chat group, La Bastida proposed to create stamps to mark Cuban banknotes with the logos of island-based opposition groups, revisiting the tactics of artists such as Ciro Mireles, who stamped Brazilian banknotes with calls for democracy during the military dictatorship of the 1970s. La Bastida's peers rejected the proposal, fearing that it was too dangerous. And then in June 2021, La Bastida returned to Cuba, and he was arrested upon arrival and subject to daily interrogations at state security headquarters for 3 months. At first, he was only accused of inciting others to commit unlawful acts because of his proposal to stamp currency with logos. However, when the mass protests broke out 2 weeks after his arrest, his interrogators accused him of having acted as an agent provocateur, alleging that he had returned to Cuba to lead the revolt. They tried to get him to admit that his ex-wife in Warsaw worked for Polish state security forces and that I worked for the CIA, and served as his American handler. The line of questioning shows that Cuban authorities sought to fabricate a Cold War-style anti-imperialist narrative in which their country's problematic artists had conspired with external agents to orchestrate a mass insurrection. Labastida's detention provoked an international uproar and pressure on the Cuban government from Polish and German diplomats. Despite the obviously political nature of his arrest, Cuban authorities stipulated that he could only be released to Poland, where his son and ex-wife reside, in order to make his exit appear to be a matter of family reunification rather than political banishment. He was warned, however, as he departed, that if he returned to the island, he would be sent back to Villa Marista. During Labastida's detention, his artist colleagues turned to performance art to bring attention to his plight and defy the Cuban government's prohibitions on the manipulation of national symbols and currency. At the Arco Art Fair in Madrid in July 2021, 15 artists and curators staged a version of Labastida's proposed intervention entitled Bills Burning the Street, using stamps with the 27N and San Isidro movement logos and the phrase "Free Hamlet" and "Art is not a crime." Fairgoers could bring the legal tender of their choice to be stamped. While the performance remained faithful to Labastida's goal of using the circulation of currency to convey political messages to an audience that might not otherwise know about it, the original message was recalibrated to refer to his condition as representative of the state of Cuban art. After the success of the performance at Arco, more artists started plans to restage the performance at the Untitled Art Fair in Miami in November. In the interim, Labastida was released and deported to Europe. He was unable to travel to the US due to his undefined immigration status, but he created new designs for the stamps and conducted interviews with press, attending the fair via Zoom, while his colleagues, myself included, stamped banknotes brought to us by audience members. The artist's decision to stand in for Labastida affirmed a shared ethos and effectively asserted the collective right to defy unreasonable laws. The validity of this claim did not go uncontested. At the Untitled Art Fair, I was visited by American art collectors claiming to be great supporters of Cuban art, who argued that artists there were all treated extraordinarily well, and that dissident artists such as Tania Bruguera and Labastida were ungrateful brats. Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara, his confrontations with Cuban state authorities are the stuff of legend and integral to his professional biography. He has been declared a prisoner of conscience by Amnesty International. He received an Index on Censorship Free Speech Award in 2017. He was named one of Time Magazine's 100 Most Important People in 2021, and he received a Prince Claus Impact Award in 2022. Although he is registered in the Cuban Association of Artisans, the Cuban Cultural Ministry officials publicly deny that he is an artist, and Cuban state media outlets have vilified him as a mercenary and delinquent. The way state authorities treat him exemplifies their efforts to control the presence of working-class black men in Cuban public space. Prior to his imprisonment in 2021, he had already been arrested more than 50 times in 5 years. In 2016, Otero Alcántara, together with Yanelis Núñez Leiva, won an international award for their Museum of Dissidents. Núñez Leiva was immediately fired from her job at Revolución y Cultura magazine, and she and Otero Alcántara became subjects of interest. While Otero Alcántara's audience on social media grew, he was targeted for frequent harassment by police. The pressure from the authorities was due in part to the socio-political content of his performances. During the 2015 Havana Biennial, Otero Alcántara paraded through the city in a Tropicana nightclub dancer's outfit to comment on the marketing of Cuban artists as exotic beings. In 2017, when the statue of Cuban Communist Party founder Julio Antonio Mella was removed to make way for the German luxury hotel Kempinski in Havana, Otero Alcántara posed there as a living statue with a mask showing Mella's face and a sign that said, "Where is Mella?" to underscore the cavalier manner in which his cash-strapped government swapped communist heroes for tourist venues. In the spring of 2021, during the 8th Cuban Communist Party Congress, Otero Alcántara strapped himself to a garrote inside his home to draw an analogy between the execution methods in colonial times and the oppressed conditions of Cuban citizens in the present. Otero Alcántara's flaunting of his defiance of the restrictions on the Cuban flag in his 2019 performance, Drapeau, in which he carried out his daily routines for 30 days draped in a Cuban flag, gave the Cuban government the ammunition needed to sentence him to prison time. That said, his directness does not entirely explain the harsh reactions of the Cuban state. His humble origins as a working-class black man and his abilities as a communicator made him a compelling figure in social media followed by Cubans. The documentation of his many arrests made him something of a celebrity. Unlike most university-trained artists who hail from Cuba's elite, tend to live in affluent neighborhoods and focus on conversations with other professionals and foreign visitors, Otero Alcántara's home is in a poor neighborhood in Old Havana. He addresses his fellow citizens as family and speaks using the popular idiom of los cubanos de a pie, which is the saying for just regular people. It was the collective hunger strike carried out by several San Isidro movement members in November 2020 to protest the arrest of a little-known rapper named Denis Solis, and the Cuban police break-in to Otero Alcántara's home to arrest them that catalyzed the protest by hundreds of young artists at the Ministry of Culture in November 2020. That 14-hour sit-in, an unprecedented performative gesture by Cuban artists, culminated in an encounter with beleaguered officials that yielded a formal list of demands for greater freedoms and cessation of the violence against Otero Alcántara and his associates. Since Otero Alcántara's imprisonment, his colleagues have devised a variety of ways to maintain his presence in social media. In the past 2 years, Cuban authorities have refused to allow his visitors to take the drawings he creates out of prison. Statements by Otero Alcántara, which are recorded during his weekly phone calls and transcribed, have circulated in international media. Artworks have been executed based on his instructions and exhibited abroad. And in 2024, artist Leonardo Pereira and journalist Norges Rodriguez reenacted Otero Alcántara's Miss Biennial performance in Madrid and Miami, respectively, to draw attention to the artist's incarceration. The Latin American and Caribbean Office of Amnesty International published a collection of 21,000 letters and drawings in support of the artist entitled Images of Rebellion, just in April of this year. And meanwhile, Otero Alcántara devotes the majority of his waking hours to creating portraits of the people around him in Guanajay prison. And I'll close with a quote from him from one of our recent phone calls. The people around me have never seen their stories reflected in a work of art. They have never felt important, so seeing themselves reflected in art objects has an impact on them. I was born in a racist, sexist, violent, homophobic reality, society's burdens that only slow it down. And when art came into my life, it was like a mirror that, like the portrait of Dorian Gray, confronted me with my aberrations. I became aware of all of what I had seen as normal. From that moment on, the death of that dark beast that we all carry inside began. I think that in part, the same thing has happened with the beings that surround me here. My work is a mirror and has horrified many by seeing themselves reflected in it, and that has made them change. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Coco. And it is that and being seen that changes everything. On that note, Octopizzo, can you tell us about, can you expand more about refuginas and also what you're doing to combat it in the foundation and in other projects with your comrades?
Yeah, sure. So Refuginas was a program that we started in 2016 in 2 main refugee camps in Kenya, Kakuma and Dadaab, which hosts around 300,000 refugees from 8 nationalities of Africa. The majority South Sudanese, Congolese, and the Somalis. For us, it was important because I feel the word refugee is always very negative, and when you tell somebody, "Oh, I'm a refugee," it's kind of like they don't want to know even more about you anymore. They're just like, "Oh, you're a refugee. It's like you're a problem. Why are you here?" When I started working in the refugee camps, where most of the people there, one, they didn't even speak the language that we speak in Kenya. Most of them are women and kids, because the men always stay behind to fight. And if things go well, they call back their families. And I felt like the camps were not doing enough, even though they call themselves humanitarians. Because first, Kenya, refugees are not allowed to work legally, so you cannot work. And then there's young people that have been there that came like when they're like 10, now they're in their 30s. There's nothing happening in their life. And I felt like it's time for especially host communities like us, the Kenyans, to come in. If the UN is doing their part, they're building the tents and they're giving education. But how about those people that already had education? Because what people forget is that when refugees come to a certain country, some of them were doctors, some of them were lawyers, some of them were artists, and for some reason that just gets swept away. So you're just another random person again. And you're not given any space to exercise what you probably knew before or what you used to do before. And our foundation comes in to help this type of refugees to settle in, we teach them to learn the local dialect, and also organize events that can help them get some jobs, because legally they are not allowed to work. And if you live in the camp, there's curfews until today. It's not the best place. I lived there for 2 months, because I wanted to experience what they really went through. You can see all the smiles in their faces, but there's nothing to smile about. They're just strong people that have a different type of endurance. And so Refugenians is to echo and to show the genius part of people that are running from places of war through either it can be like climate change, just war, like what is happening in Congo for the last, I don't know how many years, that we feel has not been highlighted compared to crisis in other places. The Congo has been, I think it's the #1 genocide globally, period. But even today, you could go 10 months without knowing what's happening there. But people are dying even as we speak today. And I feel it's so important for especially people from the African origin to speak about these problems that are happening, and we feel like, if you see, I mentioned CNN, BBC, they show us things that are not happening. They'll show you, if you hear Africa, they only show you about safaris and dying babies, the malnutrition. There's more in Africa that people don't know about. There's so much amazing things happening, so much amazing artists. And then there's the problems that we have that we feel like as young people, we should champion, and young people are the ones that have always brought change, because the older generation that is there, for some reason, have been caught up in the system that they've become so selfish to even care about what is going to happen next. So Refugenians is a program that still runs till today. Some of our refugees beneficiaries are now all over the world. Some are here in the United States, some are in Europe, some are in Canada. We keep in touch, and the program runs over and over. So that's mostly for the refugees that are coming to Kenya. We have another one for now Kenyans that are censored, and it's called Umechukua. Umechukua is a Swahili word that means have you taken. So if somebody just came to you and you're walking in the road and they ask you, have you taken? So you don't know, have you taken what? You have to ask, have you taken what? Have you eaten? Have you voted? Have you drank some water? Because we feel like people just meet and smile. And I see this a lot actually in New York. And now it's starting to happen in Nairobi too. You see somebody walking towards you, and they smile, and you smile, but you don't talk. So you just assume because they smile, they are okay, but people are not okay. So this is more of like a civic education program for young people in Kenya, because the young people have been really disfranchised, being that we are the majority, almost 60%, and yet we don't vote. So we started this program 2 years ago during the last election, because there was a lot of voter apathy, and our idea is to get more young people to be interested, to know that their power is in their vote. As much as, yes, the voting process is not as well as we want to, but the most important thing is first to be able to know that what power do I have as an 18-year-old adult in this country, and the power is my vote. So we started a campaign that went for 8 months, and we were able to register 2 million new voters that voted in the past election. Yes. And I think those two programs are the things that I hold very highly in my heart, because I don't want to be remembered for, like, having the best hit songs, the best performance, the best dressed. I'd rather, like, those people who don't even know what I sing about. They don't even understand my language, but I gave them a choice for them to speak their mind. And even for refugees, it's hard for them to be allowed to speak their mind and say what really happened to them in their countries. And this is a platform where they come and say how they feel without being judged. And we use that also as a therapy place for them, because nobody can actually afford therapy where we come from. I tried once to go for therapy, it was $70 an hour.
Expensive.
I was like, I'd rather just go rap my pain out in the booth and go home. And so this is the alternative we're giving them too. Like, you can sing your pain out, you can dance your pain out, you can paint your pain out, you can use a certain way to let this come out, that you don't hurt yourself and you don't hurt others.
Incredible. Thank you. Omaid, what are you doing? What else are you doing to combat censorship? I mean, you're here now, but you still have your hands in many pots.
Yes, so despite the challenges, which includes, they forced me out of my country, which I miss it every day. They imprisoned, even tortured my team members. They closed down our gallery. They raised the murals. But the beautiful thing with creativity and art is that in the darkest of times, you become more creative and you find new ways to resist and to raise your voice. And that is happening to ArtLords right now. Despite all of this, we did not close 2 of our offices inside Afghanistan. And what is happening with that, yes,
Can you tell us a little bit about, like, when you had to leave, what we talked about before, about when you need to go, who supported you and how you got out? Sorry to interrupt the joyful art is awesome.
That's a whole
part.
new book, and it's a huge trauma to process, but I will speak a little bit about it.
Yeah.
So first about the work that we do right now, which is very important because I really want our audience to know. We are recording the history right now, whatever oppression which is happening. Like almost any expression of art is banned. The beautiful half of Afghanistan, which is the women of Afghanistan, they are banned from doing anything. They are literally imprisoned in their homes. Gender slavery is happening in Afghanistan. So what ArtLords is doing, we are recording this. We are painting, not on the walls, but on the canvases. We have 108 female artist fellows that's coming to our studios or getting the supplies to paint. And we're getting these paintings out.
Wait, in Kabul or in the United States?
In Kabul.
That's incredible.
Right now. And these female artists, they have the supplies, they have a mentorship that we do it, and they can paint whatever pain and suffering that they face, because it's unimaginable to think of being a woman in Afghanistan, a young woman. Just imagine, you cannot even go to a park. You cannot work, you cannot study. That's incredibly hard, and in this century. So gender slavery is happening, and what ArtLords does is provides them a window to really heal, put whatever is going into their minds. And I smuggle smuggle and rescue these artworks from Afghanistan. And I have over 200 artworks right now, which is painted by these amazing artists in Afghanistan, and it has reached my office here in Virginia. So that's one way of doing it. And we're also recording, we're documenting through films and movies, whatever is happening. And every message which is coming loud and clear from Afghanistan about the oppression, about how art is banned, I think those, whenever we talk about it, whenever I talk about it, or you talk about it, I think we're amplifying those voices, and it is damaging the reputation of those terrorist groups who are controlling the country. So these are some of the kind of the work we do. And also, we are trying to evacuate some of these artists, which we did, some of them, because a lot of them, they really want to get out of the country. And you have seen the images of those planes leaving Afghanistan, which is very shameful. And I was in one of those planes as well. But a lot of people wants to get out of that country because of whatever is happening. So we are trying to help the artists, both provide them with an alternative livelihood, which is a bit of financial support, to continue doing their work, the therapy, paint their pains out, but also trying to get them out to safety, to places that they can preserve the art and culture, that when the Taliban are out, we all go back with all of our beautiful paintings and artworks and artists and continue the work.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. Khaled, now that you're here, do you feel like there's things that you can do? I mean, I think that it might be nice for you to talk about notes on displacement and for people who are going to go see it next week.
So yeah, notes on displacement. It brought like the memory of displacements, like and refugee stories as like ghosts from my childhood. Because when I was 6 years old, like 5, 7, like I remember like my grandmother, when I used to go to stay with her in the village, like she was always in silence, but her silence like was too much painful in a way that I didn't really understand what she's trying to tell me, because always before bed she will tell me like about the beauty of her home that she left in Haifa. And yeah, that raised a lot of nostalgia in my heart towards the sea, because she fled her home in Haifa in '48 when the Zionists came to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians from their homes, with the other like 800,000 Palestinians who were forcibly displaced by Haganah and by massacres and by rape and by all the like Zionists who came to Palestine with an ideology like a land without a people, for a people without a land. So it happened that by chance that this is us, this is the people that they will decline our existence on our land. And so I saw an advertising in the newspaper, like long story short, because like my grandmother, like she raised in me this like, or she inherited this displacement in my heart. And then when I read about the story of Nadira in the newspaper, that her daughter was posting about her story, that she escaped from Nazareth in Palestine, '48, when she was 9 years old, and she went and she ended up in a refugee camp in Syria, and then from Syria she was stuck in Istanbul. And then I found a newspaper ad about their story, and I found like that this, like, as if she was calling me. So I called her, and I went there to meet her, and her daughter and her son, and then I ended up like buying a forged paper from another Syrian refugee to be able to live close with Nadira, to be able to film with her, to be able to understand like this old lady who was 75 years old and lived all her life as a refugee. What is there, what she wants to say. So I was trying my best to film with her and to finish this film that will be shown on BAM Cinema on Wednesday. And now I'm finding myself in New York that I am sadly need to speak about myself and find a way to show to the people here or to the media or that I am human like you. I didn't choose to be Palestinian. If I will choose whatever it is to be. Like maybe I would choose to be like a donkey in the forest than choosing to be a Palestinian. Really, it's like to be a Palestinian, it's a responsibility, it's a lot of pain. And 2-3 months ago, I was just like going to give up everything and leave and go with my family until my partner like always putting in my mind, you're an artist, you have a voice, and this voice is so painful. It is important. And to educate the people around you and to educate the people around us about that we are also human like you. Even though it's so sad to say it, but this is the reality. Our body is being demonized for centuries, and our struggle to make our voices high and strong and loud, it's important. And thank you.
Thank you. That was a big give. I feel it.
Hi, thank you all so much for such a beautiful, rich conversation, for highlighting your experiences, the experiences of La Vestida and Alcantara, right? Alcantara, thank you. So I think I don't want to necessarily invite shade on like this space and the people in it, but I think as someone who grew up in America, has American citizenship, I think I want to reckon with the reality that we are having this conversation in the belly of the beast, that we cannot talk about the material circumstances of censorship and oppression in all of your countries and so many more without understanding the US's fundamental hand in shaping so many of these realities. So I mean, I'm kind of torn because I actually don't know what question I want to ask, so I'm aware that I don't want to come off as an asshole, but I think maybe most fundamentally, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how moving to the United States or being in the United States has, one, impacted your relationship to your art when you have material access, again, being in the belly of the beast, and two, like if you have any thoughts about what solidarity with Americans looks like, especially since we don't, as Octopizzo put it, you can't get solutions from Harvard to deal with problems elsewhere. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Very often when I talk about the situation in Cuba, I get a lot of flack from progressives that say, well, there's a U.S. embargo. And I say, yes, there's a U.S. embargo, and many people, both in Cuba and outside of Cuba, are in disagreement with that as a policy. I am as critical as I may be of the Cuban government. I think the embargo is a failed policy and it should be lifted, that it doesn't work. It has not achieved its goals, and that what it has done instead is to give the Cuban government a smokescreen in which it can excuse itself for anything on the basis of, well, there's an embargo. But there are other countries that have embargoes that are not police states in the way that Cuba is. And so my response to that criticism of, well, there's an embargo, is that an embargo is an economic policy. It does not justify the implementation of a police state. Okay? There is no way that operating as a police state can solve the problems of the embargo. So you can't, one really doesn't relate to the other. In terms of solidarity, well, in terms of what happens when you come to the United States, I mean, I have carried out my entire career based here. I have many friends and colleagues and family that have moved to the United States at different stages of their careers. What has happened to many Cuban artists who have come is that all the American curators and European curators who are so interested in them as lab rats of a socialist tropical paradise when they live in Cuba turn their backs on them when they come to the United States because they're no longer interesting sociologically, right? And that is very hurtful and harming to a lot of the Cubans who thought that, hey, I thought you were interested in me as an artist, and what I do, all you're interested in is me as a mouthpiece of some kind of social experiment that you fantasize about. So that's one thing that happens when people come here. Another is that for many, it takes a very long time to sort of transition and understand how to reposition one's practice and one's thinking coming from somewhere else. I think that being in the age of social media, where Cubans in the diaspora are much more connected to each other now and also to people on the island. I mean, I remember a time when I was a young adult when I'd have to ask for a phone call to an international operator, leave the phone in my bed, wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and have 2 minutes to talk to somebody over a line that was tapped, right? Mm-hmm. And now I can be on WhatsApp and Signal and this and that with Cubans on the island and in Sweden and in Germany and in Spain and in Miami and here and there, and we can all organize conversations together. That's a relatively new phenomenon, and that's very, it makes activism possible in ways that just weren't before, yeah. which is a very positive development. In terms of what is solidarity like from outside, I mean, at this point, the Cuban government, even though it's on its last, hanging by a thread, really. There are gasoline shortages, power outages up to 10 hours a day, shortages of food. The conditions in the country are horrible. But the Ministry of Culture is going to do another biennial this year. Just because, because it's a way to bring, it's cultural tourism that brings art currency into the country. And what some of us are asking is that people not cooperate with this. Mm-hmm. Say, this is not a time. I mean, when you have over 1,100 political prisoners, and of those, 15 are known artists. This is not a time to organize a state-sponsored, art show that has, when that same state and that same ministry and those same people who greet you when you come to Havana are the ones that put my friends in prison, and the ones who expelled my friends to live in exile all over the world. Artists, hundreds of artists have fled in the last few years. And this is not, you have to understand, it's not some bad guy in a black robe who comes in. It's the same people who welcome you to the country when you come as a tourist, mm-hmm. right? And that because of that, in recognition of that dual role in which they're really acting more as a system of punishment now than as enablers, I would say that solidarity means do not cooperate with that system until they release the political prisoners of Cuba.
But also something came up, twofold on that. One is that the illusion that the Cuban state is somehow a victim and how that gets utilized, and we see it also with the language and the rhetoric around Israel. And then also we were all talking about the empire state mentality, that these threads all go back to the big nations, United States, Germany, UK, and so forth. And it's a clear line now, it's all been exposed. And then Octopizzo, you were talking about the brainwashing and what your thoughts about it are. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so just to answer her question a little bit on the way I understood it is like, first, I'm still based in Nairobi, so I haven't moved to the state yet. So, yeah, so I'm based in Nairobi. My work is, the headquarters in Nairobi, but we work in 4 different countries. But I was here in 2018, I was studying here in UPenn. And the reason I came to the state to study, because I wondered, there's problems that we have back at home that need academic solutions, and there's problems that needs artistic and homegrown solutions. So actually I did Refugees as my thesis in UPenn, and I remember I always going back and forth with my lecturer because he didn't understand it. Yeah, he didn't understand it. And I came, when you come from Kenya or from Africa and you come to, like she said, the belly of the beast, is like you think they have answers to all our problems. And it's not the case, because as we can see globally now, America has its own problem, Kenya has their own problem. And some of problems we have at home are actually related to the American government, in both directly and indirectly. But again, I always believe that for you to change something, you can't change the system from outside. You can try, but most of the time it doesn't work. So sometimes you need to get an inside experience. And so for me, studying in the US is because I wanted to understand, how do they look at like leadership in Africa? How do they look at art in Africa? Are we just entertainers? Do they see us like we can really lead ourselves? So for me, it was like an experiment on myself. So I came to school as an artist, as a rapper, so many people just think, it's just another rapper. But I wanted to understand, how do they look at us? Was there an agreement where we have a symbiotic relationship, or is it just, you're the superpower, whatever you say, we say yes, sir? Or is there a room that I can say no? I don't like this. I don't like what you're proposing. And I think that's the most important thing I learned between the US and countries in Africa, is that it is time for young people in general from any part of the world to understand, what kind of relationships do we have with these countries? Is it benefiting our people, or is it benefiting the government of our countries? Because those are two different things. Our president was just here, I think 2 weeks ago, for a state visit, where we are being told Kenyan police should be going to Haiti to fight a war that we don't even know about. This is a good example where we should stand as young people and say, no, we are not part of this war. We don't know what is going on there. I've never been to Haiti. Why are we the ones to be sent by the US government to go fight people that we don't even know about? So this type of relationships that we have with these Western countries, I think it's high time that they need to be reevaluated. And young people need to be on those rooms to express what they feel. Because I feel those rooms have been having the same people since the 1960s. You know, same people coming, same people having tea, same people telling the same stories. And now we need new solutions for new problems. The problems we have in 2024 might not be the same that we had in 1960, and they might not need the same way to handle them. So that's how
The time is now.
I hope I answered
Thank you,
the question.
Octopizzo. That seems like a beautiful place to end. We're going to take action. The time is now. And I thank you, Khaled, Coco, Omaid, and Octopizzo, for speaking today and being so generous with being forthcoming. Thank you very much.